This video is an interview with one of the major innovators of surfing objects on waves of air, but first an introduction. The first object I ever surfed on air was a piece of telephone book paper, folded to turn like a paddle wheel as it flies. The design is simple and elegant, the perfect glider to start with. It turned out that the Tumblewing's inventor was John Collins, aka the paper airplane guy. John Collins travels to science museums throughout the world to reveal the science behind his remarkable airplane designs. When the St. Louis Science Center hosted a group of Walkalong gliding innovators, I wanted the Tumbling Wings inventor to join us. He dazzled everyone with his skill. Somebody said, "I bet if we gave him a brick, he could make it fly."
What I do for a living is actually really interesting, at least to me. I am a television producer, director, editor. I started out as a technical director and a director. I've always done voiceover work almost every place that I've worked. I had a radio shift for a little bit on my first TV job, so I've been in TV for over 30 years. Lots of experience in the entertainment world, so maybe that's the tie-in for working a crowd and kind of being comfortable in front of a crowd. And so as a kid, I was interested in, loved math, loved science, loved outdoor stuff, and I was always, as far as I can remember, fascinated with flight. It's just amazing that anything can fly, a bird, a butterfly, an insect, and all those things fly in different ways, and we've replicated that with flying machines, which is just endlessly cool to me. But as a kid, the wind would come over our house, sort of from the backyard, come over the roof, and go whipping through the front yard. And what we used to do, we came up with this technique of throwing paper airplanes where you'd be in the wind shadow just on the front yard side of the house and throw the plane up the face of the house and let it get caught in the wind coming off the roof. And it would head out across the front yard, over the street, which was a gravel road, over street, loose term. So it would head over the gravel road, and if you got a really good throw, you could get it halfway into the pasture across the road. And if you had an excellent, really lucky throw, it would get all the way out to this tree line that was on the far side of the pasture, and that pasture was probably, I'm going to guess, 3 or 4 acres. So it had to get maybe 100 yards, 150 yards to the other side of this pasture. And then sometimes the occasional lucky, really super lucky throw would get out over this field and hit a thermal that was being generated from the sun just hitting this dry ground and creating an updraft. And your plane could occasionally make it over this really tall row of trees. And it would seem like it would fly forever. And that was just amazing. And we started out folding a kind of plane that was kind of a flatbed design with a water bomb base and kind of a triangular weight system in the nose. And then I started inventing my own planes, and I can remember to this day, it was a really big moment for me, inventing my own plane that got caught in a thermal and went out over the trees. And I was, from that moment on, irreparably hooked on the idea of building and flying my own paper airplanes. I was going to be an airplane inventor from then on, and I must have been probably 9 years old, 10 at the most, when that plane just went sailing completely out of sight, became, a small dot, just a pinpoint, and then completely disappears. It's just amazing. It sends chills up my spine thinking about it now, how far that went. Of course, it had little to do with the design. Just about anything that hit that thermal was going to go that far, but that doesn't matter when you're a kid. It's magic. It's all magic, and it was really great. Well, I did take some acting, and I was a competitive speech person in high school and in college a little bit. And then studying origami for a bit. For about 10 years, I sort of studied origami. I found that was an incredible pastime, and really all kinds of great things happening with origami that are not obvious. Economy of resource. Healthcare professionals will tell you that it's great for small motor coordination, memorization skills. It's used in some cognitive therapies. For me, paper folding had always struck a chord. I liked the accuracy required, the precision. And I like the idea that you could take something really simple, just a piece of paper, and just create amazing things, and to me, an endless array of amazing things. And oddly, I was one of the first people to take all those tricks back to paper airplane making. When I wrote my first book, at that time, almost no one had done just high-performance folded paper airplanes. That was back in 1989 when I first published The Gliding Flight. And people had done books that had things in them that sort of looked like things like a flying nun or a flying fish or something like that. They looked a lot, they represented those objects well and sort of flew a little bit, and I kind of went the other way entirely. My things didn't look so much like objects that should fly, but they flew exceedingly well. One of the keys to the success of that book, in fact, was working at a TV station. I had a 60-foot television studio, and one of the requisites was that the planes would make it all the way across that studio and hit the opposite wall with a resounding smack. And so planes that didn't make that did not make the cut for the first book. So my profession had a very direct impact on my paper airplane career. As a kid, we would play with little wooden slats that came from lattice work, like you might put up for a trellis. And it was great fun to find a broken piece of trellis and throw that. And you could, if you really threw it hard, it would make this really cool buzzing sound. And then it would just sort of flutter down to the ground. And the harder you threw it, the pitch would change, and it would make a great sound, and then sort of reach a kind of equilibrium and tumble. If you had just the right shaped piece, it would tumble pretty much in a straight line to the ground. But as a kid, you know, I wasn't thinking about inventing a paper airplane design that did that. It was just really fun to throw a stick. So fast forward 20 years or so, after I had learned some origami, I had actually written my first book. Tyler McCready published this little article, talked about this technology called Walkalong wings, and it looked impossible and super cool, and so I got one, put it together, and spent 3 months learning how to fly this thing. So it took a while, not easy, it's a skill, to learn how to fly this Walkalong wing that Tyler had invented, and then I did a version out of paper, which I put into Fantastic Flight, my next book. Played with a whole lot of designs. I did a design that you tie a strip of paper into a knot, the wing knot, which is a workable version of a Walkalong wing. I call them follow foils. It was just, you know, I decided to call it something else for my book rather than steal Tyler's thunder. I was having a telephone conversation with my brother who worked for Boeing Aerospace at the time. You know, the basic idea of the follow foil is that you're just counteracting sink rate. So I was actually sort of thinking about a way to kind of demonstrate that. I'm always interested in pulling apart concepts and coming up with a demonstration that really shows you how one part of aerodynamic theory works. And to me it was interesting, the idea to separate glide ratio and sink rate and do it in such a way that you could really, really get the point across. So I thought, well, what about something that doesn't fly but just falls slowly? And at first I thought parachute, and then I thought tumbling wing. That tumbling piece of wood would fly pretty much in a straight line. What if you could do that with a piece of paper and get the piece of paper to tumble and then turn one end up and one end down maybe so that it would fly in an even straighter fashion? So I was actually on the phone talking to my brother, kicking around this, noodling with this idea, folded a piece of paper, just regular paper, it tumbled in a straight line, and I'm on the phone with him and say, hang on a second. I went and got the phone book, ripped out a sheet of paper, and came up with essentially what has remained relatively unchanged. I don't think I toyed with the width much at all before I put it right into the Fantastic Flight manuscript. You know, I came up with that, the right width and about the right proportions of folds and the right number of them for structural integrity, and flew it, holding the phone to one ear and going with the piece of cardboard. And it flew, and I remember telling my brother, I said, I've just invented this really cool thing. I wish you could see this. I just invented a tumbling wing. If you're interested in what you're trying to teach, if you have any level of expertise and you're just jazzed about it, nothing succeeds like that. And I am jazzed about paper airplanes. I am always excited to explain how flight works, how paper airplanes work, how you can just experience the scientific method with just a single sheet of paper. It just getting kids revved up about that is just an amazing experience. And you can tell when you're connecting with them, and you can tell when it's working and when it's not working, and when it's time to move on, when it's time to tell a little bit more of a story. And so it's the best job that I wish that I had full time. What I do is satisfying and creative and all that, and it's fun, and I'm lucky to have it. But if there's room in the world for one paper airplane guy, I volunteer. If there has to be just one guy on the planet, I volunteer to be the paper airplane guy. I would do that full time.